Acquired hypothyroidism is mostly subclinical. In subclinical, the clinical manifestations will not be there, and you will find that there will be elevation in TSH with only mild changes in T4, particularly in the thyroid filial forms. And it is mostly seen in the adolescent period in case of children. However, infancy also case reports exist. Females are twice more commonly affected as compared to males. Etiology wise, single most common cause is chronic lymphocytic thyroiditis. MCQ asked in NEET super specialty exam. Chronic lymphocytic thyroiditis is also called as Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So if the name is changed, don't get confused. It is also called as autoimmune thyroiditis. So different names of the same entity. Now there is a etiological classification of acquired hypothyroidism. Not only classification, it also tells you about the etiology. So first you have the autoimmune causes, which is the overall most common group. So overall most common is autoimmune acquired hypothyroidism. It occurs due to chronic lymphocytic thyroiditis, that is Hashimoto, which is the single most common cause. It occurs due to autoimmune polyglandular syndrome, APS. APS2 is more common. You find that hypothyroidism is there. 70% cases have, whereas APS1 only 10 to 15% cases have hypothyroidism. So autoimmune polyglandular syndrome, details of this syndrome I have discussed in a separate module. Then acquired hypothyroidism can be seen in association with celiac disease. It can occur with type 1 diabetes mellitus. It can occur with IPEX syndrome. And MCQ point, there are 3 syndromes with high risk of autoimmune thyroid disease. The common ones, Down, Turner and Klinefelter, they all have increased risk of autoimmune thyroid disease. In fact, Nelson says that in Down syndrome, almost 30% patients are found to have autoantibody against thyroid, out of which about 15% tend to develop clinical hypothyroidism. In case of Turner syndrome, the ratio is even greater. 40% are found to have Turner, not Klinefelter. They are found to have autoantibody, and about 20 to 30% are found to have clinical hypothyroidism. Data for Klinefelter is not mentioned, not needed. Then the second category after autoimmune is drug-induced acquired hypothyroidism. It can occur due to excess iodide use, particularly with amiodarone. Amiodarone has almost 30 to 35% weight as iodine. Nutritional supplements, they have a lot of iodide, particularly those which are having seafood derived nutrients in them. And expectorants, if you look at expectorants, some of the commercially available expectorants, they have potassium iodide or iodine derivatives in them. So excess iodine can produce hypothyroidism by an effect called as Wolff-Chaikoff effect. Wolff-Chaikoff effect is something you have already read before in your undergraduate days. Wolff-Chaikoff effect is a type of protective effect. It was first described by 2 scientists whose surname was Wolff and Chaikoff. In 1948 it was described, and it is a auto-regulatory mechanism. When there is too much amount of iodide suddenly entering into the circulation, thyroid gland tries to protect itself from making too much of thyroxine. And so in response to sudden increase in circulating or dietary iodide, what happens is the thyroid synthesis of thyroxine totally stops, and it remains stopped for about 24 to 48 hours. That effect is called as Wolff-Chaikoff effect. Wolff-Chaikoff effect is only transient, and after about 48 to 72 hours, what we find is that increased synthesis of hormone does happen. But this is how these drugs tend to produce. Excess iodide in these drugs produces acquired hypothyroidism. Then we have anticonvulsants, oxcarbazepine, phenytoin, phenobarbital and valproate. Nelson says that oxcarbazepine tends to produce reduction in it tends to produce central hypothyroidism. Oxcarbazepine reduces the TSH levels, whereas phenytoin, phenobarbital and valproate, they all tend to affect the cytochrome P450 enzymes and interfere with the normal thyroxine metabolism. Third is your antithyroid drugs, methimazole and propylthiouracil. And then we have miscellaneous drugs ranging from lithium, rifampicin, tyrosine kinase inhibitors, interferon alpha, stavudine, thalidomide, aminoglutathione, dopamine and tetracycline, which all can produce acquired hypothyroidism. Then we have post-ablative, where thyroid gland is destroyed. So you will have acquired hypothyroidism. It will be seen in radiation therapy. It will be seen as iodine 131 radioablation as used for thyroid cancers, and it will be done in thyroidectomy. Then fourth group of causes are systemic infiltrative disease in which acquired hypothyroidism can happen. It includes conditions like cystinosis, it includes Langerhans cell histiocytosis, it includes brain tumors like craniopharyngiomas, meningoencephalitis, and CNS radiation. Important point, up to 10% of children who received CNS radiation, they tend to develop hypothyroidism. Head trauma can produce hypothyroidism as well. And then we have consumptive hypothyroidism. Consumptive hypothyroidism is seen with large hepatic hemangiomas. They express an abnormal type of deiodinase called as type 3 deiodinase. What it does is, it converts T3 and T4 into the T2, reverse T3 and other inactive metabolites. The amount of thyroxine being produced from the gland is insufficient to compensate for the consumption, the destruction which is happening of thyroxine, and that leads to consumptive hypothyroidism. Cause of consumptive hypothyroidism was MCQ asked in Fellowship National Board Super Speciality exam some years back. Please remember this. Very, very important. It is mentioned in Nelson. Right. Next we move to the clinical features. Now features are very similar to what you find in congenital hypothyroidism, but there are certain differences. First of all, jaundice which was visible there will not be seen here. Then increase open anterior fontanelle, posterior fontanelle, unless it is beginning at a very young age. In that scenarios, it can be seen, but in most patients, adolescent patients, you will not find those changes to be present. Sign and symptoms will be more subtle here, and mental retardation is not seen in most of these patients, although some intellectual, cognitive disability may marginally be seen in some of the long-standing cases. So clinical features, first of all, first sign is slowing of the growth. Growth velocity is slowed down, but it is often missed. Then goiter often appears in these individuals. Then you have weight gain occurring due to fluid retention or myxedema. Constipation will develop, cold intolerance, decreased energy and myxedema of the skin. Bradycardia will be seen, there will be muscle weakness, nerve entrapment and ataxia. School performance, Nelson clearly says it is not affected, very important. Because some of the textbooks, including two of the Indian textbooks, say that there may be some decline in scholastic performance. Nelson very clearly, explicitly says that school performance is not affected, and whatever, in fact, if you go into the details and try to read more from review articles and theories, some of the texts say that the apparent decline in scholastic performance which is seen in some children is not due to the fall in cognitive ability, but it is more of a secondary thing because of, the child developing low energy, not feeling the need to work. Actual school performance, which when we say school performance, we mean the ability of child to rationally think, cognitive ability, calculating ability, all those things. They are not affected directly in acquired hypothyroidism. Then there will be delayed bone age, there will be delayed puberty in both male and female, there will be menstrual problems seen in females. Nelson says that in menstruating females, menometrorrhagia have been shown. Effects of high TRH may sometimes be seen. What is going to happen with effects of high TRH? Whenever TRH is going to be high, it will cause two set of problems. Initially, high TRH is thyrotropin releasing hormone. So TRH is being secreted from hypothalamus. So initially, this TRH will cause stimulation of prolactin from the anterior pituitary. In high amount, TRH can also cause a release of prolactin, and this prolactin in females will produce galactorrhea. So milk-like secretion will be produced from the nipples of the breast. Once this high TRH is very high, in high levels or persistently high TRH levels, it will cause the involvement of entire pituitary. It will cause pituitary enlargement. And due to pituitary enlargement, you will find features of brain tumor appearing. So you will have vision changes, pressure changes, symptoms appearing in the brain. So these are the effects seen due to high TRH in some individuals. Then MCQ point, pseudo precocious puberty may be seen in acquired hypothyroidism. Potential MCQ point. How it is seen? It occurs due to very high TSH levels, not TRH, TSH levels, which bind to and stimulates the FSH receptors. So secondary sexual characteristics can develop in certain individuals. We call it as pseudo-precocious puberty because it is due to high TSH stimulating FSH. And correcting the underlying cause and suppression of TSH is actually going to improve the condition. So what are the investigations that you will do? First, you will perform some blood investigations which will show the presence of hyponatremia, macrocytic anemia, and dyslipidemias will be seen. That is, hypercholesterolemia will be seen. There will be raised CPK in many individuals. X-ray for bone age estimation needs to be done. And thyroid hormone levels you will try to do. You will find that T4 levels will be found to be low. TSH levels will be found to be high in primary causes and low in secondary causes, also called as central causes. In addition, because autoimmune causes are most common, so anti-TPO is often found to be positive in many autoimmune patients. If anti-TPO is not present, you also need to check for anti-thyroglobulin antibody levels. So anti-thyroglobulin also you will need to do. Then you will perform ultrasound thyroid. Ultrasound thyroid will show goiter, and goiter, when you check, when you do ultrasonography, you will find that there will be diffuse enlargement and heterogeneous ecotexture found in that goiter. Mostly goiter is found to is a clinical finding, but when you sometimes in a very small goiter, you may not be able to palpate it. So you look for enlargement of the thyroid on ultrasonography in enlarged thyroid or in a clinically palpable goiter. When you try to check in autoimmune thyroiditis, you will find a diffuse enlargement with changes in the ecotexture. But ultrasound thyroid is not needed in all individuals. Now coming to treatment. Treatment wise, these are hypothyroid patients, so drug of choice will be levothyroxine. But levothyroxine dose needs to be individualized according to the weight and age of the child. So the doses will be, this is a table which is based upon what is given in Nelson. So age, if the age of the child is 1 to 6 months, the dose will be 6 to 10 micrograms per kg per day. If it is 1 to 5 year, it is 4 to 6 microgram per kg per day, 5 to 12 year, 3 to 5, 12 to 18 year, 2 to 3, and more than 18 year, 1 to 2 microgram per kg per day. We usually start with the lowest possible dose. So 4 to 6 if you have to start. So we start with 4 microgram per kg per day, then gradually make it over 2 to 4 weeks, you'll make it 5 and then go for 6 in case the desired response does not come. So lowest possible dose, then you need to hike it. You don't start with the high dose and come down. Then how you are going to, there is also a formula given in some of the Indian textbooks which say that other than age, body surface area can be used, and books give the formula that 100 microgram per meter square body surface area per day can be the general use for if you use body surface area for calculating the dose in children. So this is another alternate formula that you can use. So how will you monitor? You will monitor serum TSH every 4 to 6 months as well as 4 to 6 weeks after change in dose in the primary hypothyroidism. In young children less than 3 years of age, serum free T4 should be measured and ideally maintained in the upper half of the age. Above 3 years, you need not measure T4 levels regularly. But this is for your primary hypothyroidism. In patients who are having secondary hypothyroidism, that is central hypothyroidism, in these patients, you will need to check for T4 levels alone. TSH is not going to be that beneficial.